I had to click the go live button apparently.
No.
Oopsie. We are live now. No,
No.
again, kind of. I'm Colby. This is Fern. Welcome to Damn Fight Club again. And
Welcome, everybody. Part two.
yes, part two. Oh my god. So uh, we are covering. Oh, everything's falling apart here. We are talking about UFC Fight Night, Font versus Vera, taking place today, April 30th, at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. Prelims start at 1 p.m., main card at 4 p.m. Pacific. Both of these fight cards are taking place on ESPN Plus. So no pay-per-view. If you got an ESPN Plus membership, you are good to go. And we had just started talking about, to kick things off, the fight between Alexander Romanov and Chase Sherman, which is not on the main card. This is headlining of the prelims. This is a fight that was scheduled last week and for some reason got canceled and was just rescheduled for 1 week later. So not quite sure what happened there, but this is the one with the crazy odds. Caitlin, thanks for the party banner there in chat. This one with Romanov's got negative 2,000 favorite. So I think if you bet $20 on Romanov, you'll win $1. So the big question really before us is, how do you think Romanov is going to win? Or is it even worth, because the odds are so crazy, just to throw some money on Sherman? Because you bet $1, win 10. He's a plus 1,000 underdog. So those are crazy odds, and it's a crazy spread. And the thing about Romanov is, since he's been in the UFC, he's got 2 submissions, 1 KO, and 1 split decision. So I think it's kind of a toss-up. I'm usually see Sherman, in the stand-up fight, he keeps things standing. I haven't seen him take a ton of shots or take things to the ground a lot. Sherman's a pretty quick guy, but Romanov is also a pretty quick guy. So I think how Romanov is going to win, depends a lot on Sherman. My guess is Sherman's going to want to keep things standing up. And so my guess is probably KO. And is it first round or second round? I'll make a prediction here. I'll say Sherman lasts the first round. I say because of the odds, he's going to come out really cautious. He'll make it into the second round, and Romanov KO him in the second round. What are your thoughts, Fern?
Sherman is massive. He is huge. I think that'll help him, if anything, fight off or hold him off. If anything, I expect a takedown from Romanov. And I can see that just being kind of the beginning of the end. I think they're both big guys. When somebody like Romanov gets on top, I think he's gonna have his way. I want to see it upset. That would be amazing. Please, someone somebody shake things up some more, please. That would be legendary at this point. So
This is bigger underdog than I believe in Amanda Nunes fight when she ended up losing. I think Amanda was like a negative 1,000 favorite when she lost that last fight. So negative 2,000, yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, the announcers, the crowd would go absolutely insane if Sherman came out on top. It'll make a lot of people happy if they got money on Sherman. I wonder also, at plus 1,000 for Sherman, like if you pick like method of victory in like the round on Sherman, that's got to be like a plus 2,000, plus 3,000. So you could potentially on one of those bets, bet $1, win 30, or, bet $100, win $3,000. So it might be a fun bet to make just because the upside, if it does happen.
I'd love to see them announce during the fight, like some guy spent like $50,000 on Sherman. This is like something ridiculous, disgusting, financially like inappropriate like that. That you're like, I wish I was rich. I'd do the same. Because
just break the casino.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be like 50,000. I think would win you if you had like a $1.5 million payout. If you're at a plus 3,000,
have all of us just scowling like that's disgusting. It's so irresponsible.
Yeah, so that one should be fun. The first fight on the actual main card, though, is going to be between Jocko and Mearschart. And this one is going to be interesting because I feel like Mearschart has been, because he was so active last year. He had 3 fights last year, 3 wins by submission. that he's kind of been re-energized or renewed or something. He's making a run here, and he's 34 years old. So if he wants a shot at the title in the UFC, then I feel like he's got to make something happen. This could be the beginning. He gets two three wins under his belt. He could be looking potentially at a title fight at 185. I don't think anyone would. It'd probably be like similar odds with Romanov in terms of does he have a chance against Izzy? I don't think so,
No.
but it is interesting because Mearshart a submission artist. So if it does get to the ground, we've seen that's the one place where Izzy does have some trouble is on the ground. So maybe there's something there. And he's going against Jocko, who is coming off of a win just late last year in October. Split decision win though. And yeah, Jocko also hailing out of Poland. I guess it's worth mentioning Mearshart out of Fight Now the USA. Do you have any thoughts on this fight?
I'd like to see Mearshart win and keep moving up the ladder. I could see him, matching up well against like Vittori, that kind of physical style, that build. I want to see contenders like essentially fight their way and, definite contender come out of the mix. I know that things are going to be interesting because Vittori and Whitaker has been postponed, I believe, due to Whitaker not feeling he was 100%. For this up and coming fight. So we'll see, who that can kind of lead into the mix with them waiting for a while to fight. But I don't want to see Vittori fight Izzy. I don't want to see Whitaker fight Izzy. Give me somebody new. This could be it. I want to see some new blood in the mix. Like, give somebody else a chance to get essentially beat up. I'm sorry. It's
Yeah, well, both of these guys are longtime veterans in the UFC. Mearshart started in 2016, and Jocko started in 2013. So these guys are veterans. They're both kind of well-rounded fighters. Although Mearshart, I feel like, is probably weaker on the feet. Yeah, I feel it's close, and the odds indicate that Jocko coming in as a negative 170 favorite, Mearshart plus 145 underdog. This is one where I am probably going to pick Mearshart in terms of placing bets. Plus 145, I like those odds. I don't think it's going to be either guy's going to steamroll the other guy, but yeah, I like the underdog bet on this one. What's your prediction?
I'd like to see Mearshart. Jocko, I really haven't seen too many of his fights, but he's another one of those fighters coming from Poland. You'd have a whole different market open up. I know that the UFC is thinking about doing an event. I think they were talking about doing one in France, and it'd be great to get a
Yeah.
bunch of these European fighters on that undercard, on that fight card. Just I want to see the rowdiness, the flags, the crowds. The European crowd is always out of control. Uh, so
Yeah.
I want to see him win. If Jocko wins, I could see him being on that undercard and then kind of setting himself up for the future. Mearshart, I think if he wins, he could easily be considered in as one of those contender fights. I pick Mearshart just because I think he has the experience. At 34, 14 and 0, he's definitely put in his work. His last winning by rear naked choke. I'm a fan of submissions, but a lot of the times when I see submissions happen, I not to say I don't want to see somebody win and not take that much damage, but those safe wins to me always show that they're very methodical in their approach to their career to just be like, let me finish this and get it out of the way. Um, so his last one being by that manner, I think that's his approach is just get in there, get the W, move on, move up, and go. And so for that, his approach, his style, I think that'll have him be the victory. I predict Mearshart by submission win.
Okay. Great. And next up, we've got Darren Elkins versus Tristan Connolly. Elkins coming in as a negative 180 favorite, Connolly plus 155 underdog. And let's see here. Elkins, well-rounded MMA fighter. He's coming off of a loss. Connolly is also coming off of a loss. Connolly's coming out of Canada. Elkins coming out of the United States. These guys are both the same height, similar reach. Elkins got a little bit longer reach. Connolly's got a little bit longer leg reach. And in terms of stats, there's a lot of similarities in terms of output and I guess the biggest disparity probably on the grappling and wrestling. Connolly not really going for many takedowns in many of his fights, whereas Elkins does like to get things to the ground. So on this one, I think the odds makers got it right. I'd pick Elkins to win on this one for sure. What are your thoughts?
Elkins is tough, man. I don't know. Like, if there was somebody nicknamed the American Zombie, it'd be Elkins. Like, I've seen this guy just get beat up for two rounds, like 2 rounds, and then 4 minutes of the third round, and then come back and win. He's hard to write off, hard to, say that he's just gonna give up, roll over. He is always fighting till the end. He reminds me of a Matt Brown. Just has an insane career, been in the UFC for so long. I feel like and just can take a punch and not give up. Like it's essentially like they're their own worst enemy, when they end up losing. But a lot of times those losses are very close to being wins for them. So I agree. I want Elkins to win. I don't know where his career goes from here because he's getting up there in age. He's getting up there. He might be a fighter that I could see like fighting like a Clay Guida or somebody like that. Like give the older guys fights with each other so that these young, hungry, up and coming guys aren't putting a whooping on them.
Yeah, Phil says Elkins is a better fighter, so Phil in chat agrees as well. I think it's worth mentioning, even though both of these guys are coming off a loss, Elkins, his loss was to Cub Swanson, and with Connolly, his loss was to Pat Sabatini. Sabatini, who we just saw recently, who is absolute savage. Cub Swanson, obviously a legend in his own right. So yeah, these guys are both coming off of losses, but it matters who the loss is to, and these guys lost to really good guys. So that's also worth taking into account. What else we got? Elkins started in the UFC in 2010. Connolly started in the UFC only in 2019. So as far as experience in the UFC, Elkins has got this guy, Connolly, for sure. But the thing is, Connolly's 36 years old. Elkins is 37 years old. So even though Elkins has more experience in the UFC, it's not that Connolly's just a new young up and comer. He's definitely made the rounds in different organizations and is an experienced fighter too. So I think it's going to be a good fight. I think Elkins is going to pull it off though.
Yeah, for sure. You can kind of see Connolly's record is he's got 64% wins by submission. Elkins, he does have a lot of decision wins, but they're battles. So and looking at Connolly's average fight time, 15 minutes. Like he goes the whole distance. That even though Elkins has more wins by submission, his average fight time is significantly lower, which is crazy. Significant strikes, Elkins always stands. He reminds me of like not to that level, but like a Diaz. He just sits there and throws punches, nonstop, consistently. Throws strikes. Doesn't land as many as Connolly, but I've just become a fan of him just from seeing him take some beatings and still win and just like let people punch themselves out.
Yeah, so Elkins definitely does do more stand up than he does ground game. But if you do look at the stats, he does mix in the takedowns quite a bit, which is we've talked about before is really helpful for a guy who likes to strike, is to throw in the takedowns, even if they don't lead to submissions, because it gets the other guy worried about it. The thing that's interesting about Connolly that you brought up is that he's got a lot of submission wins, but if you looked at his takedowns, his wrestling, he seems not to be the guy who initiates getting things onto the ground if we're looking at the stats. So that is interesting. And at the UFC level, I feel like it's worth bringing up because it's different than like in a regional circuit where quite most often once you get to a certain level, the guy who's on top is going to be the guy who's winning in the judges' eyes. He's the guy who's going to be able to throw damage, and it's at the higher levels of the UFC where or not just the UFC, I mean Bellator too, but the higher levels of MMA, it's gonna be really hard to fight off your back and to submit these guys and especially someone with experience like Elkins, who's gonna know how to defend the arm bars and know what to look for to avoid getting into trouble. I'm curious, is Conley, gonna accept going to his back because he's used to being able to submit guys there and is gonna run into trouble with somebody who knows how to defend in that position. So that dynamic I think is going to be interesting in this fight to see how Connolly approaches it.
Yeah, this is a crazy fight when you're looking at the stats because Connolly has 70% takedown defense, but has more submission wins, and then, you know, Elkins has more of a decision style, but his takedown average is like what, 5 times, 6 times as much as,
Yeah,
like, what the hell? Like,
yeah,
that's why you can't count on the numbers, the MMA math.
yeah,
Because I'm looking at
true.
it like this is almost backwards, but
And it's also weird how they score takedowns in MMA. I think it's been talked about these past few weeks where, you can end up on top, but you don't get scored the takedown
mhm.
depending on the circumstances led to it. It's kind of weird. I wish they scored takedowns a little bit closer to how they do in traditional wrestling. I feel like it'd be easier to kind of understand based on the stats, what happened in the fight. But um,
What?
okay, so this
Go ahead and
good.
expand on that. What does that mean to you? Like, you're from a wrestling background. What? How does it scored? How do they follow through with that?
Well, we see lots of times like if a guy, you know, loses his balance and he, for instance, falls to his butt and the other guy jumps on top of him, that does not count as a takedown. If one guy pulls guard and goes to the back and the other guy ends up on top, that doesn't count as a takedown. If one guy takes a shot, takes the other guy down, and then or creates a scramble, doesn't take him down. One guy ends up creating a scramble, and in that scramble, the other guy ends up on top. It doesn't count as a takedown. In traditional wrestling, whoever essentially ends up with top control is the guy who scores the takedown. And this was talked about, it's controversial when Colby Covington fought Usman. When Colby was on the back of Usman, Usman's, I think one knee and one hand was on the ground
Mm.
and seemed to have control. But because Colby didn't like shoot a shot to initiate it, it started like in a clinch. And that's why I said there's kind of a scramble. And I think it makes it difficult when you're looking at the stats to really I think you should get credited anytime you're taking advantage of the situation to come out on top, whether you initiated the sequence or not. I think that's important for MMA specifically, not because they're counting as points and you don't necessarily get scored by judges. You get a takedown with no damage and it doesn't lead anywhere. It's not supposed to give you much on the scorecard, but by looking at the stats, it tells you, who is the person who ends up on top, who has the balance, who has the scramble ability, and if you exclude a bunch of those takedowns, you can end up with potentially, maybe that's what happened with Connolly, how he gets the stat of an average of 0.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. But if he's the guy always ending up on top, then that stat doesn't really reflect it. So, anyway, I think it's important because you know how important top control is in
Yeah.
MMA. And so, like, if there's a stat that indicates how often does this guy end up in top control, that's a helpful stat to, know, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's really cool in wrestling how you essentially have, the referee there counting it, calling it out as it's happening live and telling you, hey, that's a takedown.
Yeah.
And counting it, that it'd be interesting to see that incorporated in the UFC to be like, okay, you were now taken down, like that counts against you. Like, I think, it just kind of, for me, it falls in line with that round by round scoring or some kind of scoring to let people know how they're doing or how the perception of their progress or success is going on in the fight. Because there's plenty of fights we've seen where we're like, oh, it's close, it's a clear cut winner. And it's like, no, what did they judge? Even DC in that fight with Covington Usman was just like, that's a takedown. And it's like
Yeah.
they're not counting it. And he's like, "What do I know?" Like, so,
Yeah. Like,
so
yeah, all
when you
these
have an Olympic
top.
level
Yeah.
wrestler being like, "That's a
Yeah.
takedown," and then it's not counted, there's no consistency whatsoever.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know, I guess, what the purpose of that stat is in MMA. And another point you brought up too is it would be nice to know, for instance, if there's a takedown that's called in real time. But the interesting thing is it's left up to the judges on whether or not something counts as a takedown, and it's left up to the judges on whether or not something counts as a significant strike. It seems to be like the referee who's in there, in the best position to see what's going on. It'd also be interesting, I think, and maybe they introduce different levels of striking besides just significant strikes and strikes. Maybe there's a third level, because another thing that's interesting is how do you judge how many points you get for volume striking a guy versus doing damage that could potentially end the fight or almost does end the fight. It kind of seems strange that you can kind of rabbit punch a guy 20 times. It does absolutely no damage whatsoever, but it may actually get you more points in the eyes of the judges than that one punch. It'd be interesting also if the refs were calling out like really significant strikes that cause a lot of damage, that cause the guy to be stunned or go off balance or put him in trouble. And I feel like the judges, from where they're sitting, I don't know. I'm just doubtful whether or not they're in the best position to make a decision about what counts as a takedown, what counts as a really significant damaging strike. How close is it to getting a submission? That'd be another interesting signal that the ref would give up in real time, is when somebody's actually in trouble from a submission versus they got their arm around their neck but there's no pressure and it can't possibly lead to a submission. So
That just reminds me of the Aljamain Yan fight. Like you have a guy with
yeah,
back control, he's controlling him, he's not moving, but is he doing anything with it besides just holding them there? Like he's not striking. It's definitely MMA has a lot of room to grow. I as a person who watch and like, I'm not to say I'm not a fan of wrestling, but when somebody is getting takedowns or going for takedowns nonstop, and to me when they're getting stuffed, I wish that would count for something, because to me, if he gets the takedown, it counts as a point for his control. Why doesn't it count as a point for control when you go for something and I keep you standing up?
yeah,
So,
that's it. I mean, one part of that I think is just that uh, who wins the fight. I think could lead to some interesting situations where could a guy win a fight if he never threw a strike? Should you know, and if he's getting points for defense, then I feel like that could potentially be a scenario. And I
mhm,
feel like it's all based on. I do agree. I think it should be based on offense. I'm not sure that they should necessarily get scored for defense, but
mhm,
yeah, something in the scoring needs to change. There's been way too many fights where the fans are unhappy, the fighters are unhappy. Like if literally everybody's unhappy with the result as a consequence of how things are scored and judged, why can't there be some a little bit faster paced innovation? Because I mean the rules have changed since they started, obviously, but they tend to be quite sticky. So let's go ahead and go on to the next fight on this card between Jared Gordon and Grant Dawson. Gord coming as a plus 160 underdog against Dawson, negative 190 favorite. I love watching Dawson's fights. I can't wait to see it. I actually also like watching Gordon. Gordon's a kind of a Diego Sanchez, I feel, type fighter. I feel like there's so many fighters you can compare him to Diego Sanchez in terms of there's going there and willing to throw down and go to war. Um, I feel like that's a complimentary adjective to give a guy. Uh, Dawson's last fight ended up being a draw against Ricky Glenn, but before that, he was on a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fight win streak, which is crazy. I love watching Dawson's fights. He's got great wrestling. He's got a lot of submissions under his belt, and with Jared Gordon, also a good wrestler, but tends to do a little bit more in the stand up arena. What are your thoughts on these two guys?
I'm excited about this fight. This is a fight where they're looking at their records. It doesn't tell you, anything about them. You see, a lot of recent decision wins out of their last 10 fights, split or unanimous. Jared Gordon trains with Rufus Sport. That camp has a ton of great fighters, champions, former champions coming through there. I think, you can see it in his explosive dynamic style. Like, he is training with people who are like essentially trying to knock his head off in training, and I want to see that approach with somebody like Dawson, who's American top team, another established camp who's been dominant, had champions. These are both guys who to me are going to be up and comers, make a mark. They're putting in the time at renowned, well-known camps to show that their dedication to the sport, and it's going to be interesting because these are two fighters from two great camps to see who did the better game planning, the better preparation. This is going to be essentially a good matchup to me. Like this is an MMA matchup. They have the coaches, they have the skill, they have the training. Now who's going to put it together?
Yeah, you know what's crazy here? I'm looking at something. I don't think Grant Dawson is ranked, and which is crazy to me because it tells you something about how competitive the 155 division is.
Mm.
Because Grant Dawson went on I said he had 8 fight win streak, but in the UFC, one, two, three, four, yeah, 5 wins in a row, followed by a draw, and the guy's not ranked. Uh, you know, it seems kind of crazy to me. I mean, it's not that he's fighting necessarily, top 10 guys or anything, but he's clearly a great fighter, and is now a veteran in the UFC. And yeah, it shows you, I think, how deep that 155 division is that you can go on a 5 fight win streak, and yeah, it's still not even in the top 15.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because next weekend we have, the title fight at 155 to see where he's going to land. Like, is he going to go up? Are people going to drop? What's going to happen? That's definitely a fight that we're all excited about. Gaethje versus what's his name? Oliveira, isn't it?
Yeah.
Uh, and then doesn't hadn't one of these guys fought Oliveira before? Has fought Oliveira, not
Yeah. Gordon fought Oliveira in 2019, and he lost to him.
yeah. And then neither of these guys are ranked. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. 155, man, it's when you look at distributions of weights and heights and things like that with, men, 5'10", 155 pounds, 155 pound weight class means the guys are walking around 175, so it's like the most average median physical stats. That's why it's so competitive. There's so many people who have those physical attributes that would put them into that weight class. So it was same thing in wrestling, similar in boxing. Uh, yeah, it's just 155,
uh,
or it's different for wrestling, different for boxing, but right around there is always going to be your most competitive. 145, 170, quite competitive as well. But
on
yeah.
UFC.com, I'm looking at the rankings, and they all make sense for the most part. Poirier, it's Oliveira, Poirier, Gaethje, Makachev, Barry Hoosh, Chandler, Dos Anjos, Ferguson, Gregor Gillespie, and number 9, Conor McGregor. Rafael
Yeah.
Faziev, Armin Sarukian, Matthias Gamrot, Dan Hooker, Brad Riddell, Diego Ferreira to top out the top to finish off the top 15. And you you wonder at what point is Connor even still in the testing pool or anything like that? Like, get him out of here. Give
Well, supposedly
somebody
he's coming
new.
back soon.
We'll see, right?
I don't know if he's going to be able to come back at 155 though. Seeing those pictures of him, he's he's a heavy boy now, so we'll see. That'd be quite a cut to get down there. But what are your predictions on this? My predictions: Grant Dawson's going to win. I'll say by submission, and I'll say in the second round.
Ruvasport for the win. Gordon by some kind of KO. I'll do
Okay.
spinning back kick KO Gordon
Okay.
off the fence.
All right. Sounds good. Next up on the card, we got Andre File versus Janderson Brito. And File coming in as a negative 220 favorite, Brito coming in plus 180 underdog. And let's see, Filet's coming off of a no contest against Pineda. I don't recall what happened there. That was on the Gon Volkov card. And Brito coming off of a loss. Uh, this is also Brito's only second fight in the UFC. He's had one fight in the Dana White Contender Series. He won. He lost his first UFC fight. And File has had quite a few UFC fights. He started in the UFC in 2013. So he's the veteran in this matchup, going against the underdog. File, before his no contest, lost to Bryce Mitchell, who's absolutely amazing. Had a win against Jourdain before that. So he's got some notable wins for sure. He's also lost to some, the people he's lost to. You see the names, and it's
Yeah,
hard
Michael
to
Johnson,
fault the guy.
Calvin Cater, Yair
Yeah,
Rodriguez. He's
yeah.
got win over Hakran Diaz, Artem Lobov, Connor's training partner, Dennis Bermudez. Those guys at Team Alpha Male. Like those, yeah, this is going to be an exciting fight for sure. And Joe Anderson like has a great record. Like he was on a crazy win streak up until he lost in the UFC. So yeah, I'm excited for this one. Feely always puts on a fight. Very active striking. I always see him. He kind of reminds me of a Max Holloway with his stance, with how he's just always staying busy on his feet, always kind of doing those reaching punches. I don't think I've seen a boring Feely fight at all. Like he just comes out and he puts on a great fight every single time, win or lose.
Yeah, and he's very quick, and if I recall correctly, has a very nice in and out style where he strikes. He can get into strikes and then gets out of the way quickly. He's got really good movement, and it's gonna be interesting because both these guys seem to have pretty good stand up. But Brito having more subs on his record than File for sure, and File going to more decisions. But File's stats are also coming off of fights that are at a higher level in the UFC. So this one should be interesting. What's your prediction?
I think Feely's gonna finish him. He's got that range, the length, like he's tall for this weight class, 5'11". 5'11" to me, you have, even heavyweights 5'11". Like he's tall. Like usually like each weight class like you have like up to 5'6" is like the 35s, and 45s, 55s are like 5'10" at the most. So he's up there in height, range, and quickness. He's always just coming in. I hope to see him finish. I want to see him finish for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the height as an advantage here. He's only got a 2 inch reach advantage, but having that height advantage, it's not captured in the reach stat because when a guy goes to lean in to throw the strikes, he's going to have a few extra inches there as well. So Phil says he needs a new nickname though. Touchy isn't great. Maybe.
In this day and age, no.
Yeah. You might think about changing that one up. But yeah, I agree. I think Filet's going to win. I think there's going to be a lot of finishes on this card compared to last week. So I'm super excited to talk about the next fight, though. Andre Arlovsky versus Jake Collier. Arlovsky, the man, the myth, the legend. We've talked about Arlovsky quite a few times before. Arlovsky's coming off a win not too long ago against Vandera, which was, I thought, a great fight for Arlovsky. Arlovsky fought 3 times in 2021. He's already fought once in 2022. He's going for his second fight. We're not even halfway through the year of 2022. The guy's 43 years old. He's still going strong, still winning fights. He's on a 3-fight win streak. What are your thoughts on this one?
I'm gonna keep rooting for him. I'd love to see, the last time he lost was 4 fights ago against Tom Aspinall, who's clearly, gonna be a heavyweight contender. I would like to see Andre, as he looks to make a second or third run at the title, like go back to that and rematch and see if Tom is really at that level. Tom, I think, would win, but it'd just be cool to see them run that back. I'm rooting for Andre. He, to me, at one point had the most amazing, smoothest boxing I've seen for a heavyweight. I don't think I've seen anybody at that level. Like you just would see him on the mitts, on the pads, just so clean, effective, and just knocking people out left and right. And then once he kind of got touched, it went away. He got clipped, got knocked out. He got knocked out. It just became easier for him to lose that way. Collier, he's up and coming. I think he's a big guy. He's cutting to make the heavyweight limit, so I could see him looking to try to take Andre down. I want Andre to keep winning. Like we've talked about him how many times now, like 3 or 4 times, and we're just like, yeah, the old guy, keep going, and he pulls it off.
Yeah, and yeah, this is gonna be interesting. Jake tends to have a little bit higher output in the striking department, but both of them very similar in stats. I mean, they're same height, like you mentioned. Jake's got a little bit in terms of weight. It's not clear how much that's to his advantage, given his physique. I feel like sometimes it can be an advantage, maybe when it comes to some of the wrestling, but unless it's muscle, it might be working against you a little bit. So yeah, I'm rooting for Arlovsky on this one, and the odds are pretty close on this. But what's your prediction? You got any?
Arlovsky's won his last ones by decision. Arlovsky by decision. He just, with that kind of game planning and his being this far along in his career, although it's frustrating at times to see him win by decision, he's still winning and he's not getting knocked out.
Yeah.
It's a safer approach than like somebody like Alistair Overeem who would come out and you're just like, yeah, and then he just get knocked out. You're like, no.
Yeah.
So
Arlovsky's been very cautious. I'll say in terms of his approach, and very smart. Where it seems like he's just focused on the win at this point, and he doesn't care how it comes. And the crowd's gonna love him anyway, even if he wins by decision. People are still cheering for this guy because they, I've seen him fight for so long, so they're. Everyone's a fan of this guy. He doesn't need to prove anything to anyone at this point. It's just amazing to see him keep going. And let's see, who do we have on the main event? Rob Font, Marlon Vera. Odds are very close on this one. Font coming in as a slight favorite at negative 120. Vera coming in at even odds plus 100. What are your initial thoughts on this one, Fern?
Uh, disappointment just because of the weight miss. I don't know if anyone's aware. Well, you guys probably should be. Font missed weight by I believe like 2.5 pounds. It's got it listed now as an official catchweight fight at 139. That's just disappointing. Like you have a main event fight. You are trying to get your name up there. You're ranked. You're ranked number 5. You're the guy that's higher ranked. Show up to work on time, please. Says the guy who's always like, but
Yeah, that is disappointing. In Font's last fight, he lost against Jose Aldo. Interesting thing here is Font is the older guy coming in at 34 years of age. Vera coming in at 29, but Vera is the UFC veteran, or slightly. Vera had his first UFC fight in 2014. Font had his first fight. Oh, actually, they both started in 2014, but it's crazy because Vera's had more fights in the UFC and he's only 29. They started around the same time, so he's been a more active fighter. And yeah, to have that much experience at 29, just as you're going into your, what many would consider your peak in MMA, probably somewhere around 28 to 32, it seems like for most guys. Varies a little bit based on weight class, but in the 135 weight class, 29, Vera's coming in at his peak. He's got a lot of great wins under his belt. His last one being against Frankie Edgar in his last fight, and Davey Grant before that. Another interesting thing is he also lost to Aldo, but in 2020, Font in his most recent fight lost to Jose Aldo. Both of these guys have fights against or wins against great opponents. Font won against Garbrandt, Marlon Moraes, Ricky Simone. So
losses to John Lineker. Like they have a lot of common opponents, man. It's crazy looking at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've both been around for a long time, and they're both, excellent fighters. And what are the? I didn't check the rankings on this one. Where are they coming in? Okay, Avera's ranked number 8, Font ranked number 5, which makes sense because I feel like Font was essentially doing like almost a contenders fight against Aldo, who ended up losing and may have got bumped down a little bit. And Vera coming in negative or number 8. I feel like Vera, if he gets, this win over Font and gets another win over a guy in the top 5, we could be looking at, a title fight for Vera, which he's been, that's been his goal since he's made it into the UFC. He's never had a title fight before. He also has that notable win over Sean O'Malley. If you remember that really crazy foot injury thing, which in my opinion, it seems like he's the one who caused it. I didn't dismiss it the way Sean O'Malley did as like a freak accident. He's the one who caused it to happen. So I definitely give him credit for that. I don't think anyone else has been able to get the best of Sean O'Malley. Another guy ended up breaking Sean's leg, and Sean still ended up winning. So it means something. Just because you break the guy's leg, you think it's obvious that you're going to win. That's not necessarily the case. If you remember a few years back, I think in his debut fight, Sean O'Malley's debut fight. Um, but yeah, so this is going to be a good one. Both of these guys are hungry. They're near the top of the division. Either one of them, Font would probably have to get 2 or 3 wins before he's looking at a title fight. Vera, though, with this win over Font, could be one fight away from being able to fight for the title. So yeah, this is going to be a good one. I expect it to be fought mostly standing up. What are your thoughts on how this fight's going to go down?
I expect Font to come out and try to get a finish to try to get some of that money back that he's having to pay and try to get a performance finish or something. I look at their greatest victories to me when Font beat Marlon Moraes, who to me is just an amazing fighter. Yeah, comes forward and to finish him, in the first round, I was like, damn, like he can fight, he can hold his own. He's going to be a problem. And then of course, seeing Vera's fight against Frankie Edgar. Of course, Frankie Edgar's older. He's still a great fighter, and him to just obliterate him and put him to sleep the way he did. Um, I expect this to be a toe-to-toe battle. I hope Font I'd like to see him win, and try to redeem himself by just coming out and being like, I'm gonna knock this guy out and show people that hey, I'm the better fighter. Because if he doesn't, I think there's going to be some questions about his dedication to the sport and to I don't know if that will mean him not getting another main event. Like that's a huge deal to me. Like you're at the top 10 people in the world in your weight division, and you're the highlight, you're the attraction, you're the main, you're the guy on the poster. Like, and then
Yeah.
you don't make weight. Oh man.
And Phil says Font is an underappreciated grappler and can maintain if fight goes to ground. Yeah, but Vera also, when it goes to the ground game, has quite a few submissions under his belt. Another thing to take into account: Vera's never been finished in the UFC. He's lost by decision, but he's not lost by either submission or by knockout. Actually, now I'm looking at his record. I don't think has he ever been finished. I don't think he's ever been finished by submission or KO. No, I don't see it on his record anywhere. So my prediction on this one is that Vera's going to come out on top. It'll probably end up going to decision, but maybe in that third round, if Font's conditioning isn't up to par, he missed weight, so that's usually an indicator something did not go right in the in the lead up. So if his conditioning's comes into question, Vera possibly finishes him in the third round, but most likely my prediction is it's going to go to decision and Vera's going to come out on top.
Was there any insight as to why he missed weight or nothing? He's just gonna come out and fight.
I mean, yeah, a lot of guys have a story they tell you, but whether or not that's true, I never believe the stories and the excuses necessarily that the fighters give. But the bottom line is something didn't go right either in the planning or, I doubt it was just mental weakness. It was, who knows? Maybe he was a couple days late in terms of his flight, trying to get into Vegas or something. I don't know where he's booked, but I mean, there's a million things that can go wrong. So something got thrown off, because it's not like Font has missed weight every time he fights. So something went different this time than normal for him. And to me, that's it just raised a red flag. What is it exactly? You don't know for sure. It could be something, like I said, that indicates the conditioning may not be to where it normally is. If he was killing himself and couldn't make it.
No, for sure. It's definitely interesting. Uh, I'm watching the MMA interview with him on ESPN MMA, and he said just the last 2 pounds weren't coming off, and I think he just misplanned the weight cut, um, and then they realized that it just wasn't safe anymore for him to cut. So
Yeah, well, so that's another thing taking account that if they call it off because he's trying to cut the weight and can't take off those last 2 pounds, that last 1 or 2 pounds are the most miserable. So how much did they do to him? And he went to the point of, okay, if we go any further, you're endangering your life. When you go right to the edge on weight cutting like that, that's going to take a lot. That takes a lot out of a guy. So that's why, the odds are close. they're both great fighters, and I'm going to give a slight edge to Vera because I don't see Vera getting finished, which means it's most likely going to go 3 rounds, and you got one guy's conditioning who's potentially in question. So I'm going Vera.
Yeah, and these guys are, both taller. We were talking about heights earlier. They're 5'8" at, 135. I'm 5'8" and I'm 200 pounds. Like, how do these guys,
Yeah,
and I run all the time. I stay pretty active. Like, it just goes to show how committed these guys are to their sport, diet, training. They probably train all day, eat super clean, all this stuff. But, when you start, it might be a question of, is this the right weight class for him, as he gets up there in age? Those last 2 pounds didn't come off, and he had done everything the same as before. It's your body being like, no more.
yeah.
So we'll see.
All right. Well, 10 minutes before the fight starts, so I think we're gonna call it here. Anything you want to say before we sign off, Fern?
No, just stay tuned. Follow us on all social media, and then be ready for the next week's big fight, big video coming out.